A bullet whistled through the air, missing Isaac Larkin's head by mere inches, as he ducked behind the weathered oak barrel outside the Painted Horse Saloon. The year was 1876, and the frontier town of Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, had just become a lot less peaceful for the 30-year-old rancher. "Come out and face it like a man, Larkin," bellowed Hank Thornton, the local cattle baron whose empire stretched across half the territory. "Nobody steals my water rights and lives to tell about it." Isaac checked his Colt revolver, 2 bullets left. Not enough to take on Thornton and his 3 hired guns who had cornered him after the town meeting. The water dispute had been brewing for months, ever since Isaac discovered the stream on his modest property was being diverted illegally by Thornton's men. "I ain't stole nothing that wasn't rightfully mine by law," Isaac called back, his voice steady despite the danger. "Judge Wilson ruled fair and square." Another shot splintered the wood above his head. Isaac knew he couldn't stay put. The saloon door was 15 feet away, but it might as well have been a mile with 4 guns trained on the spot. The setting sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street, and Isaac calculated his odds. They weren't good. "I'll give you till the count of 5, Larkin." Thornton's voice had that deadly calm that meant business. Isaac closed his eyes briefly, saying a silent prayer. 5 years he'd been in this territory, building his small ranch from nothing, after returning from the war with nothing but nightmares and a determination to make something of himself. Now it might all end in the dirt of Redemption Creek's main street. "One!" a shot rang out, but not from Thornton's direction. One of the hired guns yelped in pain. "Two what in tarnation?" 2 more shots in rapid succession, and Isaac heard bodies hitting the ground. He risked a peek around the barrel to see Thornton and 1 remaining gunman looking wildly about for the unseen shooter. "Up here, gentlemen," called a calm female voice from the balcony of the hotel across the street. "I suggest you drop those weapons unless you want to join your friends." Isaac stared in amazement at the figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. A woman in a practical riding skirt stood with a rifle braced confidently against her shoulder, the barrel trained steadily on Thornton. "This ain't your fight, lady," Thornton growled, though Isaac noticed he'd lowered his gun slightly. "When 4 armed men corner one in the middle of town, it becomes everybody's fight," she replied coolly. "Now, drop the guns and back away." To Isaac's astonishment, they did. Thornton spat in the dirt before backing away. "This ain't over, Larkin, not by a long shot." The woman on the balcony kept her rifle trained on the retreating men until they disappeared around the corner. Only then did Isaac stand, brushing the dust from his worn denim pants and straightening his hat. "Much obliged, madam," he called up to her. "That's some shooting." She lowered the rifle and stepped into better view. Even in the fading light, Isaac could see she was striking tall and straight-backed, with hair the color of autumn wheat pulled back in a practical braid. "You might want to choose your enemies more carefully, Mr. Larkin," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Didn't exactly choose him," Isaac replied with a slight smile. "But I'd be pleased to know the name of my rescuer." "Dahlia Lawson," she answered, turning to go back inside. "And you owe me a drink for saving your hide." Isaac watched her disappear into the hotel, feeling something stir inside him that he hadn't felt in a very long time. The following morning found Isaac at his modest ranch 5 miles outside of town. He rose before dawn as usual, tending to his small herd of cattle and the 3 horses he kept. His cabin was simple but solid, built with his own hands over that first difficult winter. As he worked, his mind kept returning to Dahlia Lawson and her remarkable intervention. After finishing his chores, he made a decision. He saddled his best horse, a steady chestnut gelding named Commander, and rode back to town. He told himself it was to properly thank her, nothing more. Redemption Creek was already bustling with morning activity when he arrived. He tied Commander outside the hotel and stepped into the lobby, suddenly conscious of his work clothes and the trail dust that clung to him. "Morning, Mr. Larkin," greeted the hotel clerk, a thin man named Perkins who seemed to know everyone's business. "Looking for someone?" "Miss Lawson," Isaac replied, removing his hat. "She's staying here?" Perkins nodded. "Room 204, though I believe she's taking breakfast in the dining room just now." Isaac nodded his thanks and made his way to the small but respectable hotel dining room. He spotted her immediately, sitting alone near the window, reading a newspaper. In the clear light of day, he could see her features better. Strong cheekbones, a determined chin, and eyes the color of a summer storm. She was older than he'd first thought, perhaps in her late 20s, and there was a confidence in her posture that spoke of a woman accustomed to handling herself in the world. She looked up as he approached, recognition lighting her face. "Mr. Larkin, I see you survived the night." "Thanks to you, Miss Lawson," he said, standing awkwardly by her table. "I wanted to thank you properly. That was some fine shooting." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Join me? I'm nearly finished, but I wouldn't mind the company." Isaac sat, placing his hat on the empty chair beside him. "You're new to Redemption Creek?" "Arrived 2 days ago," she confirmed, folding her newspaper. "I'm heading to California, but my stage was delayed. Mechanical troubles, they said." "California's a long way," Isaac observed. "You have family there?" "No family anywhere," she replied matter-of-factly. "I'm a photographer. I document the frontier for Eastern newspapers and magazines." Isaac's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A photographer? That's an unusual profession for a woman," she finished, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Yes, I'm well aware, but I've found that being unusual has its advantages. People don't expect much, which makes it easier to surprise them." "Like with your shooting," Isaac said with a smile. "Exactly. My father taught me. He believed a woman alone should know how to protect herself." There was a flicker of sadness in her eyes that told Isaac there was more to that story. "He taught you well," Isaac said. "I still owe you that drink." "Yes, you do," she agreed, "though perhaps not at breakfast time." "Dinner, then?" The words were out before Isaac could consider them properly. He hadn't dined with a woman since before the war. "I mean, if you're still in town, to thank you properly." Dahlia studied him for a moment, those storm-colored eyes thoughtful. "I'd like that, Mr. Larkin." "Isaac," he corrected. "Just Isaac." "Isaac," she repeated, and something about the way she said his name made his heart skip a beat. "Dinner would be lovely. I'm told the food here is quite good." 7 o'clock, he suggested, rising from the table. 7 it is. She returned to her newspaper, but not before Isaac caught the hint of a smile. As he walked back to his horse, Isaac felt lighter than he had in years. He also felt the eyes of townspeople watching him with curiosity. News traveled fast in Redemption Creek, and his encounter with Thornton and his rescue by a mysterious woman would already be the talk of the town. Isaac spent the day in a distracted state, his thoughts repeatedly drifting to Dahlia. After finishing his ranch work, he bathed thoroughly, shaved, and put on his best shirt, kept for Sundays and special occasions. Looking in the small mirror above his wash basin, he barely recognized himself. The perpetual worry lines in his forehead seemed less pronounced, and there was a brightness in his eyes that had been absent for too long. When he returned to town that evening, the sky was painted in spectacular shades of orange and purple as the sun began its descent. He arrived at the hotel precisely at 7. Finding Dahlia already waiting in the lobby, she wore a simple but elegant dress of deep blue that complemented her eyes, her wheat-colored hair arranged more elegantly than it had been that morning. "You clean up well, Isaac," she remarked with a smile. "As do you, Miss Lawson," he replied, offering his arm. "Dahlia, please," she corrected, taking his arm. "If we're to be friends, we should use our given names." Friends. The word both pleased and disappointed Isaac, though he couldn't explain why. Dinner was better than Isaac had anticipated. Dahlia was intelligent and well-traveled, with stories of places Isaac had only read about in newspapers. She'd photographed Comanche warriors in Texas, miners in Colorado, and politicians in Washington. She spoke of the changing landscape of America with a passion that Isaac found captivating. "What brought you to Wyoming Territory?" she asked as they finished their meal. Isaac considered his answer carefully. "After the war, I couldn't go back to Illinois. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I wanted open sky and land of my own. Somewhere to start fresh." "You fought for the Union?" Isaac nodded. 4 years, ended up at Appomattox for the surrender. "And now you're fighting Hank Thornton over water rights," she observed. Isaac grimaced. "Not by choice. My land has a good spring-fed stream that cuts across the southeast corner. Thornton diverted it last summer during the drought, claiming an old right-of-way. Judge Wilson ruled in my favor last week, and Thornton doesn't take losing well. Men like Thornton rarely do, Dahlia said thoughtfully. They believe their power makes them above the law. You've encountered his type before. More than I care to remember, she said, her expression darkening momentarily. In my profession, I see the best and worst of humanity. The frontier draws both. As they talked, Isaac found himself telling her things he hadn't shared with anyone about the nightmares from the war that still woke him sometimes, about his dreams for his small ranch, about the loneliness that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him in the vast open spaces. You should get a dog, Dahlia suggested with a smile. Best cure for loneliness I know. Had one, Isaac admitted. Old hound named Buck. Lost him last winter. Haven't had the heart to replace him yet. Their conversation continued long after the plates were cleared, until they realized they were the last patrons in the dining room. Isaac walked Dahlia to the staircase leading to the hotel rooms, suddenly awkward. Thank you for a lovely evening, Dahlia said. It's been a while since I've enjoyed conversation this much. When does your stage leave? Isaac asked, dreading the answer. Tomorrow afternoon, if the repairs are complete, she said, a note of regret in her voice. I have commitments in California. Isaac nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. Would you, that is? Might I call on you tomorrow morning? Perhaps show you a bit of the territory before you leave? Dahlia's smile was warm. I'd like that very much. Isaac tipped his hat. Until tomorrow, then. Until tomorrow, she echoed, before climbing the stairs. Isaac didn't sleep well that night. His mind filled with thoughts of Dahlia. It troubled him how quickly she'd come to occupy his thoughts. He'd known her barely a day, yet the prospect of her leaving left an ache in his chest he couldn't explain. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. Isaac arrived at the hotel early, leading Commander and a gentle mare he'd borrowed from his neighbor for Dahlia. His heart lifted when he saw her waiting, dressed practically in a riding skirt and jacket, her camera equipment packed in leather cases attached to a small travel bag. I thought you might want to take some photographs, Isaac explained as he helped her mount. You thought correctly, she said with delight. Where are we going? There's a spot on my land, the highest ridge. You can see for miles in every direction. If you're documenting the frontier, it's a view worth capturing. They rode at a leisurely pace, Isaac pointing out landmarks along the way. Dahlia was an accomplished rider, sitting the saddle with natural grace. As they passed through the rolling hills leading to his property, Isaac found himself seeing the familiar landscape through new eyes, noticing the way the morning light played on the distant mountains, the graceful arc of a hawk riding the thermals above. It's beautiful country, Dahlia observed as they crested a hill overlooking his modest ranch. The cabin sat nestled against a stand of cottonwoods, the small barn and corral, neat and well-maintained. Beyond it stretched his grazing land, where his small herd of cattle moved slowly in the morning sun. It's not much, Isaac said, suddenly self-conscious. Not compared to Thornton's spread. It's yours, Dahlia replied simply. That makes it valuable beyond measure. They continued past the cabin, following a narrow trail that wound upward through rocky terrain. After 20 minutes of steady climbing, they reached the ridge Isaac had spoken of. He helped Dahlia dismount, then watched as she took in the panoramic view with obvious wonder. The vast Wyoming landscape stretched in all directions, rolling hills giving way to distant mountains, the ribbon of a river catching the sun far to the west, an endless sky arching above it all. It's magnificent, Dahlia breathed, already reaching for her camera equipment. Absolutely magnificent. For the next hour, Isaac stood back as Dahlia worked, setting up her tripod and carefully composing shots. She moved with practiced efficiency, consulting a small notebook occasionally, muttering calculations about light and exposure to herself. The magazines back east can't get enough of these frontier vistas, she explained as she worked. People who've never left New York or Boston are fascinated by what lies beyond the Mississippi. And what do you tell them about it? Isaac asked. Dahlia paused, looking out over the landscape. I tell them it's both harsher and more beautiful than they can imagine, that it changes you, being in a place so vast. Has it changed you? She met his eyes then. Profoundly. They ate a simple lunch. Isaac had packed bread, cheese, and dried apples, sitting side by side on a sun-warmed rock. The conversation flowed easily between them, punctuated by comfortable silences as they admired the view. "What time does your stage leave?" Isaac finally asked, the question he'd been avoiding. 4:00, Dahlia replied, a shadow crossing her face. "I should be back in town by 2 to collect my things." Isaac nodded, a heaviness settling in his chest. "We should start back soon then." As they prepared to leave, a movement in the distance caught Isaac's attention. Riders, 5 of them, approaching his cabin from the direction of town. Even from this distance, Isaac recognized Thornton's distinctive white horse. "Trouble," he said grimly, handing Dahlia the spyglass he carried. She looked through it, her expression hardening. "Thornton?" Isaac nodded. "And his men. They're heading for my place." "What will they do?" "Nothing good," Isaac said, quickly gathering their things. "We need to get back." They mounted and rode swiftly down the trail, Isaac leading them on a different route that would bring them to the cabin from behind the cottonwood stand, hopefully unobserved. As they approached, they could hear the sound of breaking glass and men's voices. "Stay here," Isaac told Dahlia when they reached the cover of the trees. "Please." "Not a chance," she replied, already checking her rifle. "I didn't save you yesterday just to let you get killed today." Isaac wanted to argue but knew it would be futile. They tied the horses and moved cautiously through the trees until they could see the cabin. What Isaac saw made his blood boil. 2 of Thornton's men were systematically destroying his home-breaking windows, throwing his few possessions into the yard. Another was emptying a can of kerosene around the base of the wooden structure. Thornton himself sat on his white horse, watching with satisfaction, while his 5th man stood guard, rifle ready. "They're going to burn it down," Isaac whispered, rage making his voice shake. "Not if we can help it," Dahlia replied. She moved to a better position, rifle at the ready. "I'll cover you, but let's try talking first." Isaac took a deep breath, then stepped out from the trees, his hands visible but near his holstered revolver. "That's enough, Thornton." All 5 men turned toward him, the guard raising his rifle. "Well, look who's home early," Thornton drawled, unmoved on his horse. "Was hoping to leave you a little surprise, Larkin." "This isn't the way to settle our dispute," Isaac said evenly, walking slowly forward. The judge ruled. "The law's on my side." Thornton spat. "Law? Out here I am the law. Always have been. You're just too stubborn to accept it." "Put down the kerosene and leave my property," Isaac demanded. "I don't want bloodshed." Thornton laughed. "You're outgunned, Larkin. Always were a fool." "Not outgunned," came Dahlia's clear voice as she emerged from the trees, rifle trained on Thornton. "Remember me?" Thornton's face darkened. "The interfering woman from town. This isn't your fight." "She made it her fight," Isaac said, his hand now resting on his revolver. "Now, I'm asking politely. Leave my land." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Thornton slowly raised his hand, signaling his men. "Back off, boys, for now." His men looked uncertain but obeyed, backing away from the cabin. The man with the kerosene set it down carefully. "You can't watch your back forever, Larkin," Thornton said as he turned his horse. "And your lady friend won't always be around to save you." "Try me again, and you'll find out how good a shot I really am," Dahlia called after him. "I only wounded your men yesterday. Next time, I won't be so merciful." They watched in tense silence as Thornton and his men rode away, only relaxing when they disappeared over the distant hill. "Are you all right?" Dahlia asked, turning to Isaac. He nodded, the adrenaline still coursing through him. "Thanks to you." Again. They surveyed the damage to the cabin. The windows were broken, and his few possessions lay scattered and broken in the yard, but the structure itself was intact. It could have been much worse. "I'll help you clean up," Dahlia offered, setting down her rifle. "Your stage. Will have to leave without me," she said firmly. "I'm not leaving you like this." Together they set about restoring order, boarding up the broken windows with spare lumber Isaac had stored in the barn, gathering his scattered belongings. As they worked, Isaac found himself stealing glances at Dahlia. She moved with purpose, unfazed by the manual labor, stopping occasionally to examine some item of his, a book, a hand-carved chess piece, a faded photograph of his parents. "You're not what I expected," Isaac said as they paused for water. "What did you expect?" she asked, wiping her brow. Isaac shrugged. Not someone who could shoot like a sharpshooter, stand up to men like Thornton, and still look. He stopped, suddenly embarrassed. "Look what?" Dahlia prompted, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Beautiful," Isaac finished quietly. "Still look beautiful doing it all." A flush rose in Dahlia's cheeks, but she held his gaze. "And you're not what I expected either, Isaac Larkin." "What did you expect?" "Just another frontier man with more pride than sense," she said with a small smile. "Instead, I found someone who fights for what's right, who builds rather than destroys, who sees beauty in this harsh land." Isaac felt something shift between them, in that moment, a recognition, a possibility opening up that hadn't existed before. "The stage," he reminded her gently. "There will be another," she replied, her decision made. "Some things are more important." As evening approached, they finished the essential repairs. Isaac built a fire in the small stove and prepared a simple dinner from his stores. They ate at his rough-hewn table, the cabin growing dim as the sun set. "I should get you back to town," Isaac said reluctantly as he lit a lamp. "It's not proper you staying here." Dahlia laughed softly. "I've slept under stars with Comanche guides and in mining camps with 40 men. I think my reputation will survive a night in your cabin. You can take the barn if it eases your conscience." Isaac smiled, recognizing the practicality of her suggestion. "The barn it is, then." Later, as he settled into the makeshift bed he'd arranged in the hayloft, Isaac found himself staring at the cabin where a lamp still burned. Dahlia Lawson had upended his carefully ordered life in just 2 days, and he wasn't sure he wanted it set right again. He must have dozed off, for the next thing he knew, the sky outside the barn window was beginning to lighten with pre-dawn glow. He rose, stretching out the stiffness from his unusual sleeping arrangement, and made his way quietly to the small creek behind the property to wash up. As the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the eastern hills, Isaac spotted movement near the cabin. Dahlia stood outside, her camera set up on its tripod, aimed at the brightening horizon. She was so focused on her work that she didn't notice him approaching. "Morning," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She glanced up with a smile that made his heart stutter. "Good morning. I hope I didn't wake you." "No, I'm always up with the sun," he replied, moving to stand beside her. "Getting some photographs?" "The light here at dawn is extraordinary," she explained, making a small adjustment to her camera. "The way it washes over the land, revealing it bit by bit. I've never seen anything quite like it." They stood in companionable silence as the sun continued its ascent, the golden light spreading across the landscape. Birds began their morning songs, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and earth. "Would you like some coffee?" Isaac offered when she had finished taking her photographs. "I'd love some," she replied, carefully packing away her equipment. As Isaac stoked the fire in the stove and prepared the coffee, he felt a strange sense of rightness having Dahlia in his cabin. It was as if she belonged there, her presence filling a void he hadn't fully acknowledged before. They took their coffee outside, sitting on the rough bench Isaac had built along the eastern wall of the cabin. The sun was fully up now, bathing everything in warm light. "What will you do about Thornton?" Dahlia asked after a while. Isaac sighed. "What can I do? The law's on my side, but out here, that only goes so far. He has money, men, and influence." "You have something he doesn't," Dahlia observed. "What's that?" "Integrity," she said simply. "People respect that, even in places like this. Especially in places like this." Isaac wasn't so sure, but he appreciated her faith in him. "What about you? Will you take today's stage?" Dahlia gazed out at the horizon. "I should. I have commitments, deadlines." "But," Isaac prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice. "But I find myself reluctant to leave," she admitted, turning to meet his eyes. "There's something about this place, about—" she paused. About you," she finished softly. "I've traveled all over this country, Isaac, met all manner of people, but I've never met anyone quite like you." Isaac's heart pounded. "Is that good or bad?" "Good," she said with a smile. "Definitely good." Impulsively, Isaac reached for her hand. She allowed him to take it, her fingers warm against his. "Stay," he said simply. "Not forever, if you don't want to. Just longer. Get to know this place. Get to know me." Dahlia looked down at their joined hands. I have a career, Isaac. Obligations. I know. I'm not asking you to give that up. Just postpone it. A week, perhaps. She was silent for a long moment, considering. A week, she finally said. I can telegraph my editor from town, explain the delay. Relief and joy washed through Isaac. A week might not be much, but it was something time to explore whatever was growing between them. I should warn you, Dahlia added, that Thornton won't give up so easily. Your troubles aren't over. I've faced worse than Hank Thornton, Isaac replied, and now I have a secret weapon. Oh? What's that? A photographer with deadly aim, he said with a smile, squeezing her hand. Dahlia laughed, the sound carrying across the open land. I suppose that might come in handy. The week that followed was one of the happiest of Isaac's life. During the days he showed Dahlia his favorite places in the territory, hidden valleys, ancient rock formations, a secluded waterfall that few knew existed. She photographed it all, filling pages in her notebook with observations and sketches. In the evenings, they talked for hours, learning each other's stories. Isaac told her about his childhood in Illinois, his difficult years during the war, and his journey west to start anew. Dahlia shared tales of her unconventional upbringing by a widowed father who had treated her as both daughter and son, teaching her everything from shooting to mechanical skills that served her well in her profession. He died 5 years ago, she explained one evening as they sat by the fire. Influenza. His last words to me were to see everything, to never be afraid to go where others wouldn't. He would be proud of you, Isaac said gently. You've certainly done as he asked. I think so, she agreed. Though lately, I've been wondering if always moving on is really what he meant. If maybe there's courage too in staying, in building something lasting. Isaac's heart quickened at her words. And what do you think? She met his gaze steadily. I think perhaps I've been running so long, I've forgotten how to stay still, how to let myself want something permanent. And now? Now I'm not so sure, she admitted. This place, this life you've built, it has a pull I wasn't expecting. They were interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Isaac immediately tensed, reaching for his rifle, but relaxed when he recognized the riders, Tom Parker and his son Matthew, neighbors from 3 miles east. Evening, Isaac, Tom called as they dismounted. He nodded politely to Dahlia. Madam. Tom, Matthew, this is Miss Dahlia Lawson, Isaac introduced them. Dahlia, the Parkers run the spread east of here. Pleased to meet you, Miss Lawson, Tom said, removing his hat. We've heard about you in town. Quite the shot, they say. Dahlia smiled. When necessary. What brings you out this way, Tom? Isaac asked, noting the serious expression on his neighbor's weathered face. Thought you should know Thornton's been talking all over town. Says he's going to run you out for good, one way or another, Tom reported grimly. Got some new men in from Cheyenne. Hard cases from the look of them. Isaac felt Dahlia tense beside him. When? Soon, from what I hear. He's been drinking heavy at the Painted Horse, making threats. Tom looked uncomfortable. Several of us in the valley, smaller ranchers like yourself, we've been talking. If Thornton can push you out over water rights that the judge confirmed, none of us are safe. What are you suggesting, Tom? We stand together, Tom said firmly. There's 8 of us willing to back you if Thornton makes a move. Safety in numbers. Isaac was moved by the offer. He'd always kept to himself, not fully integrating into the community of smaller ranchers. To know they were willing to stand with him meant more than he could express. I appreciate that, Tom. Truly. After the Parkers left, promising to spread the word if they saw any sign of Thornton and his men, Isaac and Dahlia sat in troubled silence. This is escalating because of me, Isaac finally said. Because I wouldn't give in. Because you stood up for what's right, Dahlia corrected. There's a difference. Still, I don't want anyone else in harm's way, especially you. Dahlia's expression hardened. I make my own choices, Isaac, and I choose to stand with you. The next morning, Isaac woke before dawn. His mind still troubled by Tom Parker's warning. He dressed quietly and stepped outside to check on the horses. The eastern sky was just beginning to show the first hints of color, promising another clear day. As he returned to the cabin, he paused, struck by the sight before him. Dahlia stood at the edge of the porch, her hair loose around her shoulders, watching the approaching sunrise. The first rays of light touched her face, illuminating her profile with a golden glow that took his breath away. The cowboy watched the sunrise light her face, and he thought heaven must look like this. In that moment, with perfect clarity, Isaac knew he loved her. It had happened so quickly, so unexpectedly, yet with a certainty that left no room for doubt. She must have sensed his presence, for she turned to him with a smile that reached her eyes. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Worth waking up early for." "Yes," Isaac agreed, though he wasn't looking at the sunrise anymore. "Worth everything." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. She stepped toward him, the morning light creating a halo around her wheat-colored hair. "Isaac," he closed the distance between them in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. "Dahlia, I know it's fast too fast, perhaps. We've known each other barely a week, but I need to tell you something." Her eyes, those storm-colored eyes that had captivated him from the first, searched his face. "Tell me." "I've fallen in love with you," he said simply. "I didn't mean to, didn't expect to, but there it is." For a heart-stopping moment, she was silent, and Isaac feared he'd spoken too soon, ruined what they'd been building. Then she squeezed his hands, a smile spreading across her face. "I've spent years capturing beautiful moments with my camera," she said softly, "preserving them for others to see. But in all that time, I've never wanted to stay inside a moment the way I want to stay in this one, with you." "Is that a roundabout way of saying you feel the same?" Isaac asked, hope rising in his chest. "Yes, you stubborn rancher," she replied with a laugh. "I love you too. Against all sense and reason, in defiance of all my carefully laid plans, I love you." Isaac pulled her into his arms then, and when their lips met, it felt like the culmination of a journey neither had known they were on. The sunrise forgotten, they held each other as the day brightened around them, the future suddenly full of possibilities neither had dared imagine before. Later that day, as they rode into town to telegraph Dahlia's editor, Isaac couldn't stop looking at her, marveling at the turn his life had taken. They had agreed she would extend her stay indefinitely, arranging to have her remaining assignments in California transferred to another photographer. She would continue her work from Wyoming, documenting the frontier from a more permanent base, his ranch, which they already spoke of as theirs. The town was unusually quiet when they arrived, with people watching them from doorways and windows. Word of Thornton's threats had clearly spread, and the tension was palpable. "Keep your eyes open," Isaac murmured as they tied their horses outside the telegraph office. Dahlia nodded, her hand resting near the revolver she now carried alongside her camera equipment. Inside the office, the telegraph operator, a nervous man named Wilson, jumped when they entered. "Mr. Larkin, Miss Lawson, I was just about to send someone to find you." "What's happened?" Isaac asked, immediately alert. "Thornton and his men rode through an hour ago, heading toward your place," Wilson reported anxiously. "At least 8 riders, all armed. Sheriff tried to stop them, but Thornton said he had legitimate business with you, something about trespassing on his water rights." Isaac's blood ran cold. "We need to get back." "Wait," Wilson said, holding out a telegram. "This came from Miss Lawson yesterday." Dahlia took it with a frown, quickly scanning the contents. "It's from my editor in San Francisco. He's coming to Wyoming, says he wants to discuss a new assignment, permanent position documenting the changing frontier." Her voice trailed off as she looked up at Isaac, her eyes wide. It's almost as if he knew. Despite the urgency of their situation, Isaac couldn't help but smile. "Sounds like fate is on our side." They hurried back to their horses, but before they could mount, Sheriff Davis intercepted them. He was a solid man in his 50s, respected for his fairness, if not his courage. "Larkin, you need to know Tom Parker and some of the other small ranchers are already heading to your place. Said they weren't going to let Thornton run roughshod over one of their own." Isaac's heart sank. "They shouldn't have gotten involved." "From what I hear, they think they should have gotten involved sooner," the sheriff replied. "Community's been letting Thornton push folks around too long. Maybe it's time someone pushed back." With a nod of thanks, Isaac and Dahlia mounted and rode hard out of town, pushing their horses as fast as they dared. As they approached the ridge overlooking Isaac's property, they could see the confrontation already in progress. Thornton and his men sat on horseback in a loose semicircle facing the cabin. Before them, on foot, stood Tom Parker and 5 other ranchers Isaac recognized, forming a human barrier. In the distance, Isaac could see smoke rising. The small shed near his south pasture was burning. "We need to get down there," Isaac said grimly. They rode down the slope, approaching from the side so as not to be immediately spotted. As they drew closer, they could hear Thornton's angry voice. "This doesn't concern you, Parker. This is between me and Larkin." "It concerns all of us," Tom replied steadily. "You push him off his rightful land. Which of us is next?" "I have legal claim to that water," Thornton insisted. "The judge was bought." "That's a lie," Isaac called out as he and Dahlia rode into view. "And you know it, Thornton." All heads turned toward them. Isaac dismounted, helping Dahlia down as well, then walked forward to stand beside Tom and the others. "Burning my property now, Thornton? That's a new low, even for you." Thornton's face was flushed with anger and alcohol. "Just a warning, Larkin. Could be your cabin next, or your barn with all your stock inside." "That would be murder," Sheriff Davis's voice came from behind them. Isaac turned in surprise to see the sheriff riding up with 3 deputies. "And I'd have to arrest you for it." For the first time, uncertainty crossed Thornton's face as he looked at the assembled group. What had begun as an attempt to intimidate one rancher had evolved into a confrontation with half the community. "This isn't over," Thornton growled, yanking his horse around. "Come on, boys." "Actually, it is over." Dahlia stepped forward, her camera in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. "I've documented every threat you've made, every act of vandalism against Isaac's property. My editor at the San Francisco Chronicle would be very interested in a story about a cattle baron terrorizing smaller ranchers, complete with photographs." Thornton stared at her, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You wouldn't dare." "I would," Dahlia replied calmly. "It's what I do, Mr. Thornton. I document the truth. And the truth is, you're a bully who's finally being stood up to." The silence that followed was broken by Tom Parker's chuckle, which spread to the other ranchers until they were all laughing openly at the mighty Hank Thornton. "You want a war with the whole valley, Thornton?" Sheriff Davis asked. "Because that's what you'll get if you don't back down now. These folks are done being pushed around." Thornton looked around at the united front before him, then at his own men, several of whom seemed uncomfortable with how the situation had developed. "This isn't worth my time," he finally spat. "Keep your miserable stream, Larkin. There's better land to be had." With that, he wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following after a moment's hesitation. No one spoke until they had disappeared over the distant hill. "Do you think he'll be back?" Isaac asked the sheriff. "Not likely," Davis replied. "Thornton's a businessman at heart. When the cost gets too high, he moves on to easier targets." The neighbors helped Isaac put out the shed fire, then stayed for an impromptu celebration, sharing the food and drink they had brought along. As the afternoon wore on, Isaac found himself surrounded by people he'd kept at arm's length for years, now calling him friend and neighbor. Later, as the sun began its descent, the visitors departed one by one, leaving Isaac and Dahlia alone once more. They sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Quite a day," Dahlia remarked, her head resting against Isaac's shoulder. "Quite a week," he countered with a smile. "Not how I expected things to go when I ducked behind that barrel in town." "No regrets?" she asked, looking up at him. "Not a single one," he assured her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Though I do have one question." "What's that?" "Will you marry me, Dahlia Lawson? Stay here, make this place ours, build a life together?" Her smile was radiant as she straightened to face him. "On one condition." "Name it." "We build a proper darkroom for my photographs," she said with a laugh. "I can't have my work compromised by makeshift facilities." "I think that can be arranged," Isaac replied, pulling her into his arms. As the last light of day faded, giving way to the first stars of evening, Isaac held the woman he loved, marveling at how quickly life could change. One moment, he'd been a lonely rancher fighting a losing battle. The next, he had not only allies, but a future brighter than any he could have imagined. And it had all begun with a sunrise, a woman with a rifle, and the realization that sometimes heaven wasn't some distant promise, but something you could find right here on Earth, in the most unexpected of places.